Welcome to Claim Your Confidence, a podcast that will introduce you to the most powerful people in the world. No matter what obstacles you face, Claim Your Confidence will inspire and motivate you to go after the life you want. Are you ready to claim your confidence?
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Claim Your Confidence. I'm Lydia Fenet, coming to you from Rockefeller Center. So, guys, I just got off a red eye at about 4:45 this morning. So this podcast is either going to be amazing or I don't even know what's going to happen. I am so excited to have my guest on today because not only is he one of the world's most influential designers, he's a gentleman who's been honestly a household name for over 30 years at this point. He's had collaborations with every major retailer that you can think of. But more importantly, he is the father to two amazing children, one of whom I hope marries my son. So, Nate, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Lydia. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm so happy that you're here. And I can't even explain to you, I have so much envy for you with your eye for design because it's just not something that comes naturally to me. So I want to start at the beginning of your life. You grew up in California. Who were you as a little boy?
I grew up actually in both. My parents were married until I was 18 months old. Mm-hmm. And then my mother met a radiologist from Minnesota and moved me there.
Oh, okay.
So I went back and forth. But as a kid, I was always very lighthearted, sort of in on the joke. Mm-hmm. I was reading like at a third grade level in kindergarten, so I had to go to the third grade classroom because I was always really curious, and I'm still really curious. And I think I was always really sensitive to my environment. I was sensitive to beauty. I would take things in. I noticed a lot. Mm-hmm. If we were invited to someone else's home, I remember even at a really early age being like, oh, this is really well done, or this is interesting, or I really like their paintings, or I really like the way the furniture, or I think the furniture should actually be laid out differently.
Wait,
because
are you serious?
Yeah.
So you're going into people's homes, you're like,
no, there was one moment I was sleeping over at my friend Ronnie's house.
How old?
10.
Okay.
And his mother and dad were gone. And Ronnie and I were hanging out and playing games and, doing all this stuff. And I asked if we could move his living room around. And so his parents came home that afternoon and their living room furniture was all completely in a different place and I was 10 years old.
And what did they say?
I mean, I think his mom was really polite. No, I don't remember. Actually, it was probably horrifying. It was probably like we probably had made like a fort or something out of something as well. But like the impetus for that afternoon's activity was that it bugged me because their furniture felt like it was in the wrong place.
Oh my
God.
I
remember feeling like that.
You're like a 10-year-old Marie Kondo.
And I feel still totally.
You're like, who is
without
this
the translator.
child?
Like just like I'm going to do this now in American English.
In American
Everybody
English.
Get out of my way.
And your mom was also in this world.
Yeah, my mom
right?
was an interior designer in suburban Minneapolis that had a lot of sort of different connotations at the time. Mm-hmm. But what she taught me very early on was vintage and antique furniture and decoration and the secondary market. Because my mother loved a flea market. My mother loved an auction. My mother loved a multi-dealer antiques mall. My mom loved old things. And so even though our styles are completely different and my mom doesn't really understand my or Jeremiah's aesthetic, nor really appreciates it,
That's hilarious, by the way.
Is. She's like,
you're like,
whatever.
I am moderately successful,
no,
mom.
She's like, I don't, whatever, this weird French 50s stuff. It's like so strange. But my, I grew up in a home that she had decorated in sort of the French country style. Mm-hmm. And it was all like multicolored cotton printed fabrics on old French furniture and some English brown furniture. But it was always just like very, very traditional.
Like heavy and
bright and plaids and paisleys and things that make me itch. Like literally.
Like nothing you've said in any way, shape, or form makes me think of you.
No, zero.
That's
but
so
I mean, like
funny.
that's where I come from. And her mother was all blue and white. Oh, so it's a really interesting thing because my mother rebelled against that.
Yeah.
And then I rebelled against the sort of environment visually that I was brought up in. Mm-hmm. But she did teach me the love of the hunt and the love of the secondary market. And it shaped me as a designer. I mean, even to this day, obviously the world has changed. I've been in business for 30 years, but even to this day, I still think that we kind of work harder at sourcing than most design firms. Like, give me an antique dealer that nobody knows, or give me some obscure auction in Genoa or wherever, or Cleveland, Ohio, and I'm in.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it's really fun for me.
So when you were with your mom, were you going alongside her?
Oh my God, everywhere.
That's amazing.
I was the guy that had to go walk back to the front desk and ask for the key to the case.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
And I was like 5.
And you loved it.
Loved.
That's incredible.
Yeah, because there's always one treasure.
Yeah.
There's always one treasure in one room, and you can find it if you really try.
I started taking car auctions after I left Christie's for a company called Broad Arrow. And so I take, a car auction out in Pebble Beach and one down at Amelia Island for this company. And there was one kind of random auction that was taking place in Gloversville, New York, where this gentleman had this big car collection of over 120 cars. And I went up to this place I've never heard of in my life. And I was there selling these cars for basically 2 days. And there was a little girl sitting in the front row with her parents. And auctions are long.
Yeah.
And this little girl was sitting there for 7 hours at a time. And one day, halfway through the sale, she started bidding, and the bids were coming in so quickly. I just saw a hand, and one of my friends was actually videoing it. And as I looked at her and I said $20,000, and I immediately said, "Oh, but I don't think your Tooth Fairy money that's going to pay for that. So we should ask your parents, perhaps."
That's amazing.
And her parents were like, "We do not want this car." It was so funny. But it makes me think of you just like sitting in those auctions and doing all those things.
Yeah, I loved it. And, it's funny. So my mother was after furniture and decoration and porcelain and silver things and boxes and all of that stuff that I still love, but it just looks a bit differently than what she's drawn to.
Yeah.
And my dad started the National Sports Collectors Convention,
so funny.
Which is all about the secondary market and rarity and baseball cards and memorabilia and all of those things. So, I literally would go from a antiques market or fair with my mother, fly to California and sit behind a card table in the summer selling baseball cards at the convention with my dad.
It's amazing.
Yeah,
it was
wild.
Really just all the time.
All the time.
It was amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing how much osmosis you pick up through that as well. I was just talking about this with someone else who came on the podcast about those early jobs and how even without knowing, you're learning. To this day, I can walk into any home, any gallery, and just having worked at Christie's for half my life, if I see a painting, it's immediately in my head, I can tell you who the artist is. Whether or not I ever studied that artist, but just by nature of having been there year over year and
just from
seeing
being around it.
Yeah.
And I'm the same way.
So you were how old when you actually left Minnesota, left California, and sort of started on your own path?
So I went away for high school, to school in sort of Western Massachusetts in the middle of nowhere.
Why? What was the impetus for that?
I was bad.
Yeah. Oh,
I wasn't paying attention.
That was not what I thought you were going to say.
No, that was why.
Okay.
I wasn't terrible. I was going down a path that my parents didn't admire.
Yeah.
So shipped off to school, but it really changed me, I think. And 2 things happened at boarding school. One was I started to become really interested in French and in the French language. And I started exploring what that was, and it always comes back to a teacher.
Yeah.
There's always a teacher whose passion you connect with. And my French teacher, Cheryl Storm at Cushing Academy, was that woman for me.
Wow.
And I just thought she was so interesting, and I loved her speaking voice, and I just would take any class that she offered, including French phonetics, which seems insane. But
probably helps out now.
Yeah, right. So it just opened my eyes, I think, in a different way. And then I went to college in Chicago. And the funny thing for me about having been a boarder in high school is that I wasn't interested in drinking beer out of a hat. I wanted to take internships, and I wanted to meet people, and I wanted to be done with school. And so I went to a couple of frat parties and went to the weird sort of local bar, but it wasn't my scene. And I ended up taking an internship with Leslie Hindman Auctioneers in Chicago, which turned into my first job, proper job. And I condensed all my classes to 2 days and spent 3 days in Chicago and working, and then 2 days of classes up in the suburbs. And it actually it's still who I am.
Yeah.
If I can organize my life in that way to be doing something that I'm really love and I'm really interested in, then it's a priority for me.
Then it's a priority. What were those early days in the auction world like? Because now you've gone from the person who's running after everything in the hunt. I guess there's still a large part of the hunt of working in an auction house, but you're also seeing the commercial side of this and really understanding the structure of it. What were those early days like for you?
Well, the early days were really a free-for-all. When I look back on it, it feels like the Wild West.
We were talking about this before the podcast.
Yeah, it's just
so true.
It's just shocking.
Yeah.
Everyone would be arrested. Everyone would be, not that anyone was doing anything actually criminal, but like there was no cancel culture, there was no social media, there was no internet.
Yeah.
If you wanted to know what was coming up in a sale, you were on the mailing list and received a printed catalog in the mail.
Yes.
Period. Or you came to the preview and paid for a catalog when you walked in the door, unless you were a known client. Yeah. So, it was an absolute free-for-all. And I was very, very young, and I was a terrible assistant to a really nice person called Colleen Euland, who I'm still friends with. And she would go into Leslie's office and cry and say, there's all these letters that he's meant to type to these trust and estates attorneys, and he's not doing anything. He's downstairs in the safe playing with the jewelry with Jessica Nixon.
Yeah, because you were literally like, I am not the assistant. This is my path. I don't think you understand.
I'm doing everything. Well, you know what it was, though? I'm so drawn to things. I wrote a book, The Things That Matter. Mm-hmm. I am so drawn to objects and the stories that they tell.
Yeah.
And so, Leslie always used to say that the auction business was fueled by the 3 Ds, death, divorce and debt.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking that, but like, it was so riveting in the early days because a regional auction house, as you well know, has to take an entire estate. Mm-hmm. You have to take the coffee mugs just to get the one sort of bad Bernard Buffet painting.
Yep.
And so we would take this entire estate, and as the youngest, least senior person on the team, my job was to catalog all the junk. Actually, do you know Anne Eaglebrink?
Yes, of course.
So
I know
Anne and I
well.
worked together there.
Gosh.
And it would be Anne and I in the warehouse floor in the dark with questionable animalistic sounds at our feet. and we would just sit there, and I'd say to Anne, like, is this like George III? Is it George III? And she'd be like, yes, I've told you this and taught you this 500 times. And then as punishment, I had to catalog an entire consignment of Toby jugs, which I still loathe, and then dolls. 3,000 bisque head dolls.
That's the problem with working at a regional auction house, because then you get the toys and dolls and like the arms and armor and all of those opaque
and rugs,
departments and
filthy rugs.
I know.
And like, there's no world where I'll ever understand still after having had this been explained to me 10,000 times. I'm like, red field with bordered by foliate. It's like math to me. Like I look at a rug and my brain just
doesn't
shuts down.
compute.
No,
yeah,
and
absolutely.
it just goes away.
And I think if you've never worked at an auction house, I understand everything Nate's saying, because this was so much a part of my world when I was young. I can't even explain to you how many stories you hear about people. They're like, well, I was in this cellar and I'm covered in dirt because this table fell over and completely covered me in dust. And everybody's always like, oh, you work for this glamorous auction house.
Oh, it was so not glamorous.
It's not glamorous at all. But if you enjoy it, I think that's the key.
I was so passionate about it. And like, when a truck would pull up with all the boxes from an estate, it was just, I still am that way.
Yeah.
Like, unpacking and seeing what people collected over a lifetime.
Yeah.
And then even within that, like, finding the one thing in the box that actually had a resale value that wasn't going to be like combined in some like sort of box lot of mystery pottery.
Yeah.
But like, you're digging around and all of a sudden there's an Hermes bag.
Yeah.
Or there's a really amazing bracelet. Or there's like an absolutely incredible Paul Storer sterling bowl. And you're like, what is happening? I mean,
you are literally a walking, talking Antiques Roadshow. I mean, it is
100%.
You were Antiques Roadshow before the show came
about
on.
It. A new
I'm
one.
Sure.
Really? Yes, I'm super excited about it. So
my gosh.
we'll see, but we have it in development right now, and
that
I
is
love
really
it.
exciting.
Yep.
Just so you know, I just pitched Nate on being an auctioneer for the agency, because
I'll do it.
Nate was an auctioneer as well, and he and I have been sort of like, I can't even tell you how many times I've stared down at a table in the middle of a charity auction. I'm like, there are Nate and Jeremiah sitting right there.
Like, hey guys.
You're like, please don't look at us and ask us to give more than we've already given. And I'm like, I'll just come back to you once. It's really never anyone's favorite thing to know me when I'm on stage during a charity auction. They're like, here she is.
Like, Jared, quick, grab the blonde wigs.
Totally. So tell me about being an auctioneer. I want to hear about this.
Well, first of all, let me sort of set the scene for you. I'm 24 years old at this point, 23, 24 when I worked for Leslie. And Leslie didn't want to come on Saturdays. And I was responsible for the marketplace sales, which were the sales of everything, like I said, really the junk. But she wanted me to make sure that all the young people at the time in Chicago knew that you could buy a Baker sofa for $50 on a Saturday. And so she gave me a marketing budget, and I took out ads in what became niche modern media now. And but at the time it was literally like a mimeographed magazine called Chicago Social that we all read so we could see ourselves at a dumb cocktail party at a store.
Diary,
beyond.
Store,
I was like, I am famous. I just got photographed standing at JP Todd's. And I'm literally Brad Pitt.
Yeah.
But
I know those days. I remember that.
So I was heavily involved in those days and in Chicago, which was a great city for this because, quite truthfully, Wright hadn't opened the modern auction house. There were some much smaller, sort of less marketed auction houses, but Leslie really was the leading auction house. And Leslie was a brilliant marketer and a brilliant businesswoman, and she built the whole thing on her own. And so I still, you can tell, deeply admire and love her, and we're still very good friends.
I feel like so many people do. I hear this all the time.
There's a lot of people that don't, but I'm one of them that do. It was interesting because Leslie turned to me and she said, I'm going to give you a $100,000 budget per month, except for the month of December.
Okay.
And you have to sell $100,000 worth of junk, and it's going to be really, really hard. The property department's going to hate you because you're going to make them work on the weekends. The marketing department's going to hate you because I'm not giving you a separate budget, but I expect to see well-placed marketing to promote your auctions. I'm 23. And she said, and I need to teach you how to sell. So she brought me up in some of her bigger sales, never for a lot that we
needed
was
to
super
sell.
Yes, that was super important. But when it went to the teacup portion, she was like, Nate, come on up here. I was surprised, actually, looking back on it, that she didn't just get in a taxi and leave. But
here's a doll for you to sell.
She's like, you're going to be great.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't you worry about a thing. You're my Tobias. Yeah. But she was great, and she taught me how to be an auctioneer, and she taught me how to have fun with the audience, and she taught me how to make keep eye contact, and she taught me how to enjoy myself up there and joke and laugh and reference personal things to the people and clients that I knew. And I had a blast.
Yeah.
I loved it. I mean, here I was, 23 years old. My degrees, the ink on my degree from college is barely dry. It's really my first job. And I'm standing at a podium pre-internet in front of the wealthiest, most creative, most interesting, smartest cross-section of Chicago society. Yeah. And they were like, who's this kid?
Yeah.
So by the time I started my design firm a year later, which started, by the way, with Leslie's apartment on Lakeshore Drive.
That's amazing.
She said to me, I'll support you completely. I had a whole list of contacts, from real estate brokers to antiques enthusiasts to collectors to contemporary collectors to jewelers to all of these people that home mattered to.
Yeah.
And that's how I got my start.
That's an incredible story. It really is. And did you continue working with her at that point? Or you just...
she would have me over on Sundays for tuna fish sandwiches.
Oh my God.
But she did give me her apartment to work on as one of my very first projects. And, I remember that conversation with her. I would sit on the radiator in her office, and she would sit in her chair. And I walked in and lit one of her Salem menthols, and as did she. And I said, Leslie, I have to quit. And she said, I was grooming you to, take this over someday. And I looked at her and I said, I'm not your guy.
Yeah.
I'm not your guy. I don't like the 8 o'clock Monday morning meeting. Yeah. I want to work for myself. But I cannot tell you how much this whole experience has meant to me. And if there's a way that you don't turn me into some sort of horned devil for quitting, I would be a friend of yours for life.
Oh my God.
And we are still friends.
It's so amazing to me because in this day and age, everybody is an entrepreneur in the face of their brand. It's very common.
Yeah.
But it was not common when you started this.
No, not
30
at all.
years ago. I mean, nobody was the face of their brand.
No.
There was a brand. I mean, maybe like a Calvin Klein or something like that in fashion. But I mean, to be an interior designer with a name, even at that age, I talk a lot about confidence on this podcast, but was this confidence that was gained because you just had a great eye and you knew it and you were getting positive feedback? Or had you been the kind of person who would just walk into a room and own it from the minute that you walked in?
My parents gave me the enormous gift of letting me fail as a kid.
Yeah.
They weren't overprotective. They weren't, and I wish I was more like my parents in some ways because I'm so protective of my children and their feelings and all of these things. But my parents let my feelings get hurt. My parents let me run with a crazy idea, throwing a carnival for the neighborhood kids and going to the stores in the strip mall and asking them to donate things as prizes for the carnival. And my parents were
I
like,
would have come to that carnival.
it was fun.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, actually, I feel like nobody showed up. I think my
I
mom,
would have
my
come
mom
to
and
that
her
carnival,
girlfriend cried in the corner. They felt so bad for me. But I enlisted all the neighborhood kids. They were always game.
Yeah.
And I think from a very early age, my parents both just demonstrated to me by not interfering in some ways that I could do whatever I set out to do.
Yeah.
And so I've always had that base level confidence from my childhood, which I'm still sort of base level grateful for.
Yeah.
But professionally, when you grow up like that and then you fail publicly, it was like mortifying to me.
Yeah.
So I ate a lot of humble pie to be, completely transparent. I made a tremendous amount. I've made and continue to make mistakes all the time. Yeah. But the face of the brand sort of question, going back to that, I was the face of my own brand, but I was also representing Oprah's brand because she was the person that gave me the opportunity to have a public persona and to be on television repeatedly over a 12-year period.
How did that happen? Because Oprah, and this is 2002, right?
Yeah.
There was a time when Oprah was kind of it. Like Oprah, and Oprah still is it.
If you were a baker and Oprah liked your cupcake,
that was it.
That was it. You were a millionaire.
Yeah.
Period. And that was how life worked and society worked then.
So how did Oprah cross paths with you?
So I was working in Chicago as an interior designer with a small firm. I thought I was super cool.
Yeah.
I had like a house in Michigan and an apartment. I was like,
Here you
I'm
are.
great. And it was time for me to move my offices. And I moved from an office building to the River North area of Chicago, which is the Gallery District. And I rented a space. I looked at 1 million spaces and I decided to rent a space on the first floor because I thought if business is ever slow, I could use this space commercially in a different way. I could open a furniture store, or I could open an antique shop, or I could open a gallery or estate jewelry or whatever I wanted to do, but it felt important at the time. Greg Lauren, who is Ralph Lauren's nephew, Susan and Jerry's son, was married to Elizabeth Berkley, and Showgirls had just come out.
Yes, of course.
And Greg, who's a fashion designer, is also a fine artist. And he and I connected, and he said, I've done these shows of my drawings in LA and in New York, but I really want to come to Chicago. And so I threw a party for him and an opening for him. And it was amazing. Like the fire department came. Victor Skrivnesky, the photographer whose offices were next door to mine, closed his party and came to mine.
Oh, yes.
Like it was just like, it was one of those nights.
Yeah, magic night.
And unbeknownst to me, there were a handful of Harpo producers there that weren't on my list. They were on Greg and Elizabeth's list.
Oh my gosh.
And so about a year after that party, I got a call from a producer at Harpo that said, would you be interested in doing a small space makeover on the Oprah show? And I said, yes, of course. That sounds amazing. Yeah. And they said,
you just let me think. Yeah, the answer is yes.
Well, actually, what's so weird about it is that actually happened subsequently in the same initial conversation. They said, can you bring your plumber and your electrician and your carpenter to Boston tomorrow? Can you leave within like 5 hours? The project is in Beacon Hill, and we need you there and all your team. And I said, can I call you back? And so I thought about it for a minute, and I called the producer back and I said, listen, my plumber loves me, but not that much.
Yeah.
None of these trades people are going to leave their project that they have going right now to have an opportunity to appear in the background on a segment of the Oprah show.
Yeah.
What I would do if I were you is I would reach out to some of the national home improvement retailers, Lowe's, Home Depot, Menards, find out because they know all the trades in their local area.
Yeah.
So I would reach out to them. You're going to have local people I don't know how the machinations of the business side of this would work, but this to me seems like much easier and much better.
Yeah.
I will be available whenever you need me to be.
Whenever you want.
Whenever you want.
Here I come.
and they did that. Harriet Seitler from Harpo, who ran business affairs, called, I think it was Menards that we worked with for the very first one, but that developed into contracts that we had with all of them, that they would supply the trades for whatever makeover needs I had in whatever market we were working in for the next 12 years. So I almost didn't get it because I didn't say sure.
Yeah.
But I'm really glad I didn't.
Well, also because you knew what it was going to take for you to succeed.
Yes.
And that's equally important in success, is understanding what you can, where your limitations are.
100%. And going back to your question about being the face of the brand, I wasn't particularly strategic around being on Oprah. Like, it wasn't like, I wasn't like, oh, I'm going to be really wealthy and have all these opportunities. That didn't really occur to me. I was just wanted to put my best foot forward each time.
Yeah.
Obviously, opportunities were born from that. And what I was very conscious of, because I watched it, was that I never wanted to do anything that would jeopardize Oprah's brand, Oprah's name, Oprah's reputation.
Yeah.
And when I started getting licensing deals or endorsement deals or publishing deals, I would go into her office and I would say, hey,
Oprah.
Linens and things.
Hey, Oprah.
No, literally, I'd be like, hi. And she'd be like pulling her eyelashes off. And I'd be like, hey, so quick question for you. This is true. I would say Linens and Things wants me to design a collection for them and they're going to put it in all of the Linens and Things stores. Will you feature it on the show? And she'd say, well, I need to see it first. If I like it, I would be happy to, but I'm not going to give them that guarantee, nor you, until I see what you're doing. And I'd say, okay, great, that's fair. Hey, do I have to give you any of the money from that? And she literally looked at me, she goes, do I look like I need your money? So, I mean, that was how we communicated.
Oh my God,
I was always like a very straight shooter, didn't waste her time.
Yeah.
Everybody wanted something.
Of course.
And I was conscious of that.
Yeah.
But I was always really gracious and really respectful.
Yeah.
And I still am.
That's amazing. It's incredible, even at that young age, because I can see that going one of two ways. You either have that sort of emboldened person who's just like, I'm amazing, not ever thanking the person who gave them that platform from which to spring. And then you have the person who works in tandem with them. That must have been such a wonderful partnership. And how cool to be on that show. I mean,
it was so amazing. And I worked
right?
with the same crew of producers and watched them rise through the ranks. I mean, my same team from Makeover 1 to 12 years later. We were together in parked cars, eating French fries, waiting for paint to dry.
Oh, my God.
I mean, it was a blast.
Those shows stress me out. I cannot
It's really stressful.
I cannot.
I might be too old.
Oh, my God. I can't even explain to you the level of stress. I have an issue making a pillow color decision.
Well,
I'll be like,
my husband's now on Queer Eye. Like, he's the new designer on Queer Eye, and they're filming right now, and he's in it, and I'm not.
Oh, my God. Are you so grateful?
Kinda. Like, I literally, he comes home, and he looks like he just passed through the birth canal, and I'm like, are you going to be fine? He's like,
I think so.
Tomorrow. I'm like, okay. I'm like, God, I've been there.
That.
I've been there.
That's hilarious. Oh my gosh. What an incredible opportunity. And it's amazing to see how you've been able to really transform that. So a couple of years into being on Oprah, there was a huge shift in your life when something happened in 2004, which I think most people listening would know about.
Maybe.
Do you want to talk about it?
Sure.
You don't have
of course.
to.
No. I was vacationing in Sri Lanka.
Yeah.
My first time in that area of the world. With my boyfriend of a year, who we were deeply, deeply connected and deeply, deeply in love. His name is Fernando Bengoechea. And he was a super adventurous person who grew up in South America, lived here in New York, was a successful working photographer here in New York at 39 years old. We met, we were mad for each other, and he wanted me to see the world because he told me, you know, having a Heathrow and an Orly stamp in your passport does not mean that you know anything. And I was like, right, okay. Shock, embarrassing, but okay. So he was very intrepid. He was a fascinating, fascinating person. And in particular, fascinating to me. We went to a place, it was the only place that he had ever gone back to. He only liked to check a box and say that he had been somewhere, but he wanted me to see this very remote surfing village in Sri Lanka. And so he brought me there, and on Boxing Day, the Indian Ocean tsunami happened. He was never found, and I miraculously survived and came back and 2 weeks later actually went back on the Oprah show, which randomly, like on the internet, still is like very controversial. People say I used the tsunami to become more famous. I was like, or I used it to raise money to rebuild the entire town through Oprah's Angel Network.
Yeah,
where
or
Fernando
if you've never
had
been
died.
through something like that, how could you even say
Well,
anything?
right.
I
So
mean, truly.
keep that.
Yeah.
So
Please take your feedback back.
Exactly. Keep your feedback.
Yeah.
No one cares.
Yeah.
But I was very clear that Oprah was going to donate all of the proceeds with no administrative fees whatsoever to charities of my choice that were working and operating, like Free the Children, Save the Children. We rebuilt, with the money from the Oprah viewers, the fisherman's hut where they came and got their tea and bought the new kettle for the lady that made the tea in the morning, and built a 2-story vocational school there in the town. So it was very important for me to activate around the experience.
Yeah.
I'm really like one of the few people I know to have found true love twice.
Yeah.
It's crazy. My husband and I just celebrated our 10-year anniversary.
I saw that on Instagram.
It's like he's my favorite human being. So it was definitely like a deeply pivotal, unbelievably traumatic experience. And I look back on it now. Well, let me say this. I wouldn't recognize myself not having gone through that.
Yeah.
I know
what
it
you mean.
changed me fundamentally. Well, you've had,
No, I asked that question because I do think after something with deep trauma, people will say, what are you like now, or how are you different after that experience? And I look back on it, and it was almost like life before the car accident and life after the car accident, and there was so much clarity about life, the finality of life, the opportunities for doing things in life that you thought you may never do, just because you're not really scared of things after you've been through something like that.
You're scared of nothing.
You're really scared
Don't
of
you
nothing.
remember? Yeah, like it's true. It doesn't last.
Yeah.
By the way, like now I'm scared of everything again because I
great.
like so worried about my kids and my husband and but I'm working through that still.
Yeah.
But I do remember that feeling like if that didn't get me, nothing will.
Yeah, it's so true. One of my best friends I said to, I remember we were on a plane maybe 3 or 4 months afterwards, and all 5 of us were on the plane. And the plane, I mean, we hit some serious turbulence, and the plane was going up and down. And I'm watching everyone like white knuckle the chair, and I was like, there is no way. And my friend, who's super caustic, was like, actually, statistically, it could totally happen. I'm like, absolutely not.
But I actually moved through the world with that exact
I really
confidence
do now.
too.
I know.
I did. I mean, I really, really did. Like, it's so funny. I've used that exact same thing has happened to me. And I remember looking around and being like, it's not going to happen.
No,
like,
absolutely.
There's no way. What are the chances? No way.
My friend Auburn, if she was listening, would be like, actually, statistically, it could happen. I'm like, you know what? I don't need your negativity right now because I am fearless.
Exactly.
Well, I'm sad to hear it wears off because I've really enjoyed it for the past
I'm sorry
2+ years.
to be the messenger for that.
Well, you were younger. Maybe.
Yeah, that's
maybe
true.
I have less
That's
time,
true. That's fair.
So.
That's true.
So you came back. So yes, you went on Oprah's show. You had that incredible moment, and then you moved forward from that. You stayed with Oprah for another 10 years, really, from that.
My fear around experiencing the loss of Fernando and being part of a natural disaster that claimed over 250,000 lives in a moment was that I would never be functioning again.
Yeah.
And I worked with an incredible grief counselor, and what he told me at the time was 2 things. One, that grief is not linear, that you're not going to hit a stage and then feel fine and never go back. His concern for me was to not ever be stuck in the grief. And so that was really my primary focus in healing myself, was that I wouldn't be stuck in the grief and thereby not able to love again.
Yeah.
Or I wouldn't be stuck in the grief and thereby not excited to experience a new adventure.
Yeah.
I just didn't feel that because he died that it was morally, spiritually okay for me to give up.
Yeah.
Like my life to me had to mean something to honor the fact that he didn't have that chance.
Yeah, because he sounds like such an incredible person.
Yeah, amazing. Beyond.
So there you go. So when did you meet Jeremiah?
I met Jeremiah 12 years ago at a party. Rachel Zoe's 40th birthday party, to be specific.
Sounds like it was fun.
It was fun. Rachel was a friend. Jeremiah worked for Rachel and was on her show. They called him Baby Nate at the office.
Really?
Yeah.
Why?
Because there was something about him that reminded Rachel and her husband Roger of me. And Rachel would say to me, you would just really like this guy. Like, it's so crazy. But I was dating someone else and he was as well. And we met at her 40th birthday and it was super appropriate. Both of us, again, were dating other people. Mm-hmm. And 2 years later, he was on a surfing trip in Amagansett with some friends. And he reached out and said, I'm going to be in New York. I had just gone through sort of a fiery breakup. Mm-hmm. He was in the middle of trying to decide whether or not he should be in his own fiery breakup. Mm-hmm. And I invited him over one Sunday afternoon. And I said, I'll show you my New York. Yeah. You know, we'll have lunch and hopefully that'll lead to dinner. But I want you to see like the antique shops and the places I go and the neighborhoods and whatever. And we've been together ever since that day.
Oh my God, you had a smile as you were telling that story. That was so wide. It was so cute to watch. It's so cute.
It was because it was like one of those things like where we were like laying around and reading design books together and pointing out what we both thought was interesting. And somehow I thought he was taller from meeting him once at Rachel's. And I don't really trust tall guys, so I was like, I don't really understand what's going on up there.
Chris Delaney, if you're listening, Nate Berkus does not. He does not trust
Chris
you, babe.
Delaney, but I'm not, married to Chris Delaney.
That's true. That is true.
But it was, it was an interesting thing because, like, I remember opening the door of my house on 9th Street where I lived at the time, and he was just standing there, and I think in that moment, something clicked for me before he even said a word. I was like, oh,
there he is.
Yeah.
That's
like,
amazing.
Wow. Like, did a stork drop you off? Like, it was like so random. But we've actually been together and happily ever since that first moment.
I love it. And so a couple years into meeting him, you guys must have decided to have Poppy.
Yeah. Actually, we decided to have Poppy. It's funny. So my siblings, they all say to me that I chew through life. Like, they don't understand my pace. They don't understand how I work, how I'm happy to get on a plane like you and come back the same day and, whatever, totally. I'll do whatever.
Like more.
Yeah, like, let's go.
But people who understand it. Everyone else is like, what on earth are you
my
doing?
brother, Jesse, is like, I would die if I lived a week of your life. Like, I would just die. And I was like, no, you wouldn't.
That makes me happy to know there's another person who
so that was
that.
it. I had never met somebody who moves through life quicker than my husband.
Wow.
It makes my pace look like I'm 90 years old.
Wait, how does that even happen? Because my husband is the polar opposite.
He is so, like, intrepid. He's so ambitious. He's so, not in a yucky way, he's so, like, he just, like, he'll be doing something major that anyone would be like, oh, I've arrived. I've done this. And he's like, what's next?
Oh, my God.
So
I need to spend more time with Jeremiah.
I mean,
this is the way
unbelievable.
I feel. Absolutely. I love that kind of personality.
I am like the slow to change, slow to embrace change now. Like, I don't know where that reputation came from in our apartment, but that's what we've got.
That's incredible.
So we met, we fell in love. We were both designers at very different stages of our career. Mm-hmm. I have a lot of admiration for him because he never asked me for advice. He wanted to go out and carve his own identity, and that was really hard at the time because there were a lot of red carpets then, and there were a lot of events then, and everyone was like, Nate, and Jeremiah.
Yeah.
And now I'm the plus one.
Yeah. That's kind of cool.
It is great.
Fun.
It is great. It took a minute, but it's great.
Yeah, right. You're like, sometimes I like to be Nate, right? Well, I think of you guys as equally amazing. So if that is any measure. So you have all these lines and collaborations. Another thing that I love is I ran partnerships for Christie's for 12 years. I love partnerships. To me, it's like 3D chess.
Yeah.
You're sort of like figuring out these different pieces and slotting them in. You have some cool ones coming up. Tell me a little bit about those.
Yeah. So we work with Living Spaces, which is a West Coast retailer. Uh-huh. We work with PetSmart, which seemed very random at the time, but is actually selling really well.
Did Poppy and Oscar influence that?
A little bit.
Yeah.
But, like dog beds inspired by French 40s furniture. So we like French 40s wicker inspiration. And people are like, I actually think that's great. So
I would like to have that.
Didn't know if that was going to hit, but it did. I have Nate Home, which is sold on Amazon and Target and bedding and towels and soft goods. Jeremiah I can't really speak for him right now, but he's got some major launches timed with the launch of the show.
Amazing.
Yeah.
My gosh, you guys are just firing on all cylinders.
Yeah, but it's we have a co-brand, Nate and Jeremiah 4, and then there's Jeremiah Brent and there's Nate Berkus. And he'll ask me like, "Do you like this sideboard?" And I'll be like, "Yes." Or I'll say to him, "Do you think this color way is going to work?" He understands the higher end, and I understand mass. So it's kind of an interesting partnership that way.
Kind of a perfect partnership.
Yeah. I mean, there's some moments he's always pushing for a different sort of materiality, or he gets very fixated on one detail. And I'm like, babe, the lamp is $39.99. No one cares.
No one
Literally,
cares.
no one cares.
So I was having a conversation before this podcast with our mutual friend Grace, and she said to me, "You have to ask Nate about his sort of Spider-Man ability to flip a watch." She said, "You're incredible at watches, and like this is your thing." Is
well,
that the truth?
goes into like the same thing. I mean, you know what? It falls in my categories of things that I look for at auction and online are obviously furniture and decoration and paintings and photography, whatever things in the home.
So everything.
Everything.
So everything that is
except
sold
Toby
at
jugs
auction.
and dolls.
Except those dolls.
Never bought one. Still never bought one.
No.
But I love collecting jewelry for Poppy, and so I've built a really beautiful collection, and watches. I love watches. Again, it's the half sort of my mother's side of aesthetics and beauty and luxury married to my father's baseball card addiction.
I love it.
I'm like, what's the model? What's the bracelet? Who designed it? What's the best price for it? And I'll dig.
Yeah.
I'm the guy that if you want something amazing, whether it's a ring or a watch or a chest of drawers or whatever, all of my friends and all of my family, like for that special birthday gift or anniversary gift, all of my friends come to me. Literally all of them.
Chris Delaney, my birthday is in October, so please give Nate a call because I would like some jewelry. So we will get you on that
Chris.
immediately.
Exactly.
All right, Nate, where can we look for you moving forward? Where do we find you? How do we follow your frenetic pace?
The easiest is at Nate Berkus on Instagram. Also my website, nateberkus.com. So everything's in one of those two places or both.
Well, I hope for anyone who's listening, this has inspired you to start digging. I always like to end with something, but I would say that's it. I mean, start digging into all of it, whether it be your life, living a huge life as Nate has done, or digging into the things that are in your closet. Hopefully you can find some great things. Maybe send them to Nate and he can tell you if they're good or not.
Exactly.
This has been such a pleasure. The time has absolutely flown, and I'm sure you have 9 places to be.
Well, thank you for having me. It's so much fun.
No, truly, such a pleasure. And thank you to everyone for listening. I'm Lydia Fenet. This is Claim Your Confidence. Thank you to Rock Center. Thank you to Joe, who keeps this all moving. It's so amazing. And thanks to you guys for listening. I'll be back again with you next Tuesday. This is Lydia Fenet. Claim Your Confidence.